Consider this for a moment. You are a tropical primate. Your ancestors spent millions of years evolving under the relentless African sun, developing sweat glands to dump excess heat, sparse body hair to allow air circulation, and elongated limbs to maximize surface area for cooling. You are, by every biological metric, a creature designed to overheat, not to freeze. And yet, approximately 26,000 years ago, at the absolute peak of the last glacial maximum, your ancestors made a decision that defies every instinct written into their DNA. They walked north. Not a casual stroll into a brisk autumn afternoon, but a deliberate, sustained migration into a continent-spanning meat locker where temperatures routinely plunged below minus 40 degrees Celsius, where the wind could strip exposed flesh from bone in minutes, and where the ground remained frozen solid for months on end. There were no electrical grids humming with warmth, no synthetic puffer jackets stuffed with down alternatives, no weather apps warning of incoming blizzards. Just meat, bone, stone, fire, and an almost incomprehensible refusal to die. The mathematical improbability of this survival is staggering. By all rights, we should have turned around at the first frost. Instead, we colonized the ice. The first and most critical realization these northern pioneers had to accept was that their greatest vulnerability was not their lack of claws or their relatively modest strength compared to the megafauna they hunted. It was their skin. Human skin is a disaster in Arctic conditions. It leaks heat like a sieve, offers no protection against wind chill, and provides zero insulation when wet. Early humans who attempted to survive winter with nothing but crude animal hides draped loosely over their shoulders died quickly, because a blanket with a neck hole is not clothing. It is a drafty tarp that traps nothing and channels freezing air directly against the body. The true revolution, the single most important technological breakthrough of the entire Ice Age, was not the spear, was not the hand axe, and was not even the mastery of fire itself. It was the bone sewing needle. This seemingly humble object, typically carved from a sliver of mammoth ivory or a bird bone sharpened to a fine point, fundamentally altered the trajectory of human survival. With a needle and sinew thread, a hunter could take a massive, irregular animal hide and transform it into a form-fitting garment tailored precisely to the human form. This was not merely an improvement in comfort, it was the invention of insulation itself. By cutting hides into shaped panels and sewing them together, ancient tailors created trapped air pockets between layers of leather and fur. Air, as any modern engineer will confirm, is one of the most effective insulators in nature when it remains stagnant. These early parkas and trousers, often constructed from multiple layers of different furs, functioned on the exact same thermodynamic principles as a modern Arctic expedition suit. The outer layer, typically made from water-resistant fur like that of a reindeer or seal, shed snow and wind. The inner layers, composed of denser, softer pelts, trapped body heat in microscopic pockets of still air. The result was a microclimate, a portable tropical bubble that allowed a savanna-adapted ape to walk through a blizzard and maintain a core temperature of 37 degrees. Without the needle, there is no tailored clothing. Without tailored clothing, there is no northern expansion. Without northern expansion, there is no Europe, no Asia, no Americas. The bone needle is the fulcrum upon which the entire weight of human migration balances, and it was invented by people who had never seen a thermometer but understood, through brutal trial and error, that loose hides kill and fitted clothes save lives. But clothing, no matter how sophisticated, cannot sustain a human indefinitely in a landscape where the very ground tries to kill you. Shelter was the next impossible problem, and in the treeless steppes of Ice Age Eastern Europe, the solution was as macabre as it was brilliant. Modern survival enthusiasts might imagine building a log cabin, but there were no logs. The advancing glaciers had pushed forests hundreds of miles south, leaving behind a flat, windswept tundra where the only building materials of any significant size were the bones of the very animals these humans hunted. Enter the Mammoth bone hut, one of the most extraordinary examples of prehistoric structural engineering ever discovered. Archaeological sites like Metabolic in Ukraine have revealed circular dwellings constructed from the interlocking skulls, jawbones, tusks, and ribs of dozens, sometimes hundreds, of woolly mammoths. These were not crude piles of debris. These were calculated load-bearing structures. The massive curved tusks served as arched supports, their natural curvature providing structural integrity that distributed weight across the frame. Skulls were stacked to form sturdy walls that could withstand the incredible lateral pressure of blizzard winds. Long bones and ribs filled the gaps, creating a lattice that was then draped with heavy mammoth hides and insulated with layers of sod, dirt, and snow. The dirt layer is particularly important because while it seems counterintuitive to bury yourself in frozen soil, compacted earth provides remarkable thermal mass and wind resistance. When sealed with a hide outer shell, these huts created an interior space that could maintain temperatures significantly above the outside ambient air, especially when a small fire burned continuously in a central pit. Imagine, if you will, a heavily fortified Arctic military outpost designed by engineers who had no access to steel, concrete, or lumber. Their entire inventory consisted of rocks, tusks, and the bones of the largest land mammals to ever walk the earth. And yet, they built homes that were windproof, insulated, and structurally sound enough to last through months of darkness and storms. Some of these dwellings were over 30 feet in diameter, housing extended families and their precious fire through the endless night of an Ice Age winter. The psychological weight of living inside a house made of skulls cannot be understated. Every wall whispered of the hunt, of the massive creatures that had to be killed and processed to create this sanctuary. It was a monument to survival built from the architecture of death. Inside these bone fortresses, the true battle was not against the wind or the snow, but against a silent, internal enemy that threatened to consume them from within. The human body, when exposed to extreme cold, becomes a furnace that demands fuel at a rate that would bankrupt a modern calorie-counting app. Simply maintaining core body temperature in sub-zero conditions can increase basal metabolic rate by 50% or more. For active hunters and laborers working in deep snow, the requirement could double or even triple. A modern adult might comfortably survive on 2,000 calories a day. An Ice Age human in winter needed 4,000 to 6,000 calories, minimum, and there were no grocery stores, no granaries full of stored wheat, and no domesticated livestock in pens. The solution was as direct as it was brutal. These humans became hypercarnivores, pivoting their entire dietary strategy toward the densest energy sources available in the frozen landscape. They did not hunt for lean meat. They hunted for fat, the pure, white, caloric gold that accumulates in the bodies of Arctic mammals. A kilogram of animal fat contains roughly 9,000 calories, more than double the energy density of protein or carbohydrates. Bone marrow, the soft tissue hidden inside massive leg bones, was another precious resource, cracked open with stone tools and consumed raw or rendered over fire. The archaeological record is unambiguous on this point. Isotope analysis of Ice Age human remains shows dietary signatures overwhelmingly dominated by mammoth, reindeer, horse, and other megafauna, with an emphasis on the fattiest cuts. These people were running their metabolisms like internal chemical furnaces, shoveling pure animal energy into a biological fire that never went out. They ate the brains, which are essentially lumps of fat and cholesterol wrapped in tissue. They consumed the tongue, rich with lipids. They cached frozen carcasses in natural ice boxes, returning to them throughout the winter like living from a meat locker they had stocked themselves. The idea of a balanced diet with fruits and vegetables would have been a hilarious luxury to someone trying to prevent their body from consuming its own muscle tissue for heat. In the dark months, there was no room for dietary preference. There was only the mathematics of thermodynamics. Calories in, heat out. Fail the equation, and the cold solves you permanently. Fire, of course, was the obvious companion to this metabolic inferno, but its role was more nuanced than simply providing warmth. The mastery of fire-making and maintenance in deep winter was a full-time occupation that required specialized knowledge, constant vigilance, and social coordination. Finding dry tinder in a frozen world is an art form. These people collected birch bark, which contains natural oils that burn even when damp, and cached it in waterproof containers. They maintained embers, sometimes for days, carrying them in portable fire kits made of slow-burning materials. The hearth inside a mammoth bone hut was not merely a source of heat. It was the gravitational center of the entire social universe. Around that fire, in the orange flicker that pushed back the darkness and the cold, something extraordinary began to happen. Winter forced proximity. In the warm seasons, hunter-gatherers could disperse across the landscape, avoiding conflict, maintaining loose social bonds, and living in small mobile bands. But when the blizzards came and temperatures dropped to lethal levels, dispersion meant death. Families had to aggregate, strangers had to cooperate. Dozens of people, sometimes from different bands with different dialects, were crammed into a single bone hut for weeks or months at a time. The psychological pressure of this forced intimacy was immense, but out of that pressure emerged one of humanity's most powerful survival tools: complex language. Not just the grunted commands of the hunt, but nuanced, abstract communication capable of resolving disputes, negotiating resource sharing, and transmitting detailed technical knowledge across generations. The winter hearth became the first university, the first courtroom, and the first theater. Around those fires, elders taught children how to knap flint into deadly spear points, how to read the migration patterns of reindeer herds, how to predict weather by observing the behavior of Arctic foxes. Stories were told, not merely for entertainment, but as mnemonic devices encoding survival information in memorable narratives. The myth of the great mammoth hunt was not just entertainment, it was a training manual disguised as legend. Social hierarchies solidified, as the most skilled hunters, the most knowledgeable elders, and the most diplomatic negotiators rose to positions of authority not through violence, but through the undeniable value of their contributions to group survival. Winter did not just test the body, it forged the mind and the social contract. The technological arms race did not stop at clothing and shelter. These humans innovated constantly because the ice demanded it. They developed tailored footwear, insulated with grass and fur, that allowed them to walk across snow and ice without losing toes to frostbite. They created portable shelters, lightweight tent frames made of bone and antler that could be transported across the tundra as they followed migrating herds. They invented storage pits, dug into the permafrost and lined with hides, that functioned as natural freezers to preserve meat through the lean months. They refined their hunting tools, developing the atlatl, a spear-throwing lever that increased the velocity and range of their projectiles, allowing them to take down dangerous prey from a safer distance. Every innovation was a response to a specific, deadly pressure. The cold was a relentless engineer, and it forced human ingenuity to evolve at a pace that no tropical environment ever could. In the jungle, a mistake means a wasted afternoon. In the ice, a mistake means a frozen corpse. The stakes could not have been higher, and the human response was to become smarter, more cooperative, and more technologically sophisticated with each passing generation. Consider the psychological profile of these people for a moment. They lived in a world of permanent twilight during winter months, where the sun might only peek above the horizon for a few hours each day, if it appeared at all. The landscape was monochrome, a vast expanse of white and gray that offered no visual stimulation, no green life, no warmth. The silence of deep snow is profound and alien to a savanna primate evolved for open grasslands filled with sound and color. And yet, they did not go mad. They did not retreat south in overwhelming numbers. They adapted their minds as thoroughly as they adapted their bodies. They painted, the famous cave art of Chauvet and Lascaux, while often associated with warmer periods, reflects a cognitive capacity that was honed in the crucible of Ice Age survival. The ability to create abstract representation, to imagine and depict animals with breathtaking realism and symbolic meaning, suggests a mind that had developed internal worlds rich enough to compensate for the external bleakness. Art was not a luxury. It was a psychological survival mechanism, a way to maintain mental coherence in an environment that offered nothing but hostility. The same cognitive architecture that allowed them to imagine the migration of herds allowed them to imagine gods, spirits, and narratives that gave meaning to their suffering. Religion, in its earliest forms, was likely born not in the abundance of the tropics, but in the desperate need to explain why the world was trying to kill them and to petition whatever forces controlled the weather for mercy. The end of the Ice Age, when the glaciers finally retreated and the world warmed, did not mark the end of this legacy. It marked its explosion. The people who had survived the winter had become something new. They were no longer just clever apes with sharp rocks. They were engineers of insulation, architects of bone, metabolic specialists, linguistic masters, and social strategists. The extreme pressure of the cold had pushed human technology, culture, and cooperation to limits that would never have been tested in a forgiving climate. When the ice melted, these enhanced humans did not simply relax into the new warmth. They expanded with a ferocity that only a species forged in the harshest conditions could muster. They populated the Americas, crossing land bridges and ice sheets that no tropical primate could have navigated. They developed agriculture not because they had to, but because they possessed the organizational and technological sophistication to manage complex systems. They built civilizations on the foundations of cooperation and innovation that winter had forced them to develop. The cold did not destroy humanity. It created the version of humanity capable of destroying every other challenge the planet could throw at it. We did not merely survive the ice. We conquered it, absorbed its lessons, and emerged as a species that could build cities, split atoms, and send probes beyond our solar system. The next time you zip up a winter jacket, remember that you are wearing the distant descendant of a mammoth hide parka sewn with a bone needle by someone who looked at a frozen wasteland and decided it looked like home. The winter did not break us. It made us inevitable.